I always believed that love was built on trust. That when you chose someone, when you vowed to share your life with them, it meant something unbreakable. For years I held on to that belief like a fool clinging to a fraying rope. I thought my wife, Emily, was my partner in life, the mother of my children, my best friend. But I was wrong. The betrayal didn't come in a single, explosive moment. It wasn't like the dramatic scenes you see in movies, where the husband storms in to catch his wife tangled in bed with another man. No, this was slower, more insidious. It crept in like a shadow, whispering in the quiet moments of my life when I was too distracted to listen. Emily and I had been married for 9 years. We had 2 beautiful children, our son, Ryan, who was 6, and our daughter, Lily, just 4 years old. They were my entire world. I worked hard to give them a good life, juggling long hours in IT while still making time to be a present father. I worked from home most days, balancing conference calls with diaper changes and bedtime stories. It wasn't easy, but I never once complained. This was the life I had chosen, and I loved it. Emily was a stay-at-home mom for the first few years, but as the kids grew older, she wanted more time for herself. She said she needed space, a break from the stress of motherhood. I understood. I encouraged her to go out, to spend time with her friends, to visit her parents. She told me that's what she was doing, going to see her folks in the evenings, maybe staying over if it got late. I had no reason to doubt her. At least, not at first. It started with small things, little shifts in her behavior that I brushed off as exhaustion or stress. She started dressing up more, wearing perfume that she hadn't worn in years. She'd come home late, her voice filled with excitement, but when I asked about her parents, she gave vague answers. Sometimes, she'd be too tired to talk at all, slipping into bed with a sigh and turning away from me. I wanted to believe it was nothing. That she was just rediscovering herself, finding joy outside of being a mother and wife. But the doubts started eating at me. Then, one night, everything changed. She had left earlier than usual, claiming her mother needed help with something. I had no reason to think twice, until Ryan woke up crying in the middle of the night. He wanted his mom, and when I reached for my phone to call her, I noticed something odd. Her location sharing was off. She never turned it off. My heart started pounding. It wasn't a gut feeling anymore, it was cold, hard fear creeping into my bones. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. Not once. Not twice. Not at all. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, staring out at the empty street, waiting for her headlights to appear. When she finally came home, just past 4 in the morning, she looked different. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly messy, and she reeked of alcohol and something else, something I didn't want to name. She gave me a quick excuse about her mother feeling sick and went straight to bed. But I knew. And that was just the beginning. I sat in the dark for a long time after Emily went to bed. The room was silent except for the occasional sound of the ceiling fan humming above me. My mind was racing, my stomach twisting into knots. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But there was something in the way she walked past me, the way she avoided my eyes, the way she pulled the covers over herself without a word, like she knew if she said too much, it would unravel. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft, steady breathing beside me. She slept like a woman with no worries, no guilt, no shame. Meanwhile, my mind was playing out 1,000 scenarios, each worse than the last. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. Emily woke up groggy, rubbing her temples like she had the worst hangover of her life. I was already in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids when she finally emerged from the bedroom, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. She barely glanced at me as she grabbed a cup of coffee. "Late night?" I asked casually, flipping pancakes on the stove. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yeah. Mom wasn't feeling great. I stayed with her until she fell asleep." "Funny," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I called a few times. You didn't pick up." Her grip on the coffee cup tightened. I must have been asleep. I turned to look at her, studying her face. The whole time? She let out a breath, rolling her eyes. I had a few drinks while I was there. Guess I passed out on the couch. Ryan and Lily sat at the table, oblivious to the tension in the room. I forced a smile, not wanting to upset them. But inside, something was breaking. I decided I needed proof. The next few days were torture. Emily continued her routine, claiming she was going to her parents' house, staying out late, coming back in the early hours of the morning. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I watched. I started checking her phone when she left it unattended. She had become more cautious, locking it when she never used to, but I knew her passcode. There weren't any incriminating messages, no obvious affair staring me in the face. But I did notice something strange. Her texts with her mother were short, distant, almost unnatural. And then I saw it. The last time she had actually called her mother was nearly 2 weeks ago. If she was spending so much time there, why weren't they talking more? Then came the night that shattered everything. Emily left around 7, kissing the kids goodbye like nothing was wrong. She barely looked at me. I waited a few minutes after she left before grabbing my keys and heading out. I had never followed my wife before. The thought of doing it made my stomach churn, but I had no choice. Her parents' house was on the other side of town, about a 30-minute drive. But as I sat in my car, watching her taillights disappear down the road, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She didn't turn toward their house. She turned in the opposite direction. I followed her, keeping a safe distance, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. She drove for about 20 minutes before pulling into the parking lot of a nightclub. Not a quiet bar. Not a restaurant. A full-blown nightclub, the kind she used to love before we had kids, before we had responsibilities. I parked a few spaces away and watched. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her dress, smoothing her hair. Then, as if on cue, a man appeared out of the darkness. Tall. Broad shoulders. Too familiar. I didn't recognize him right away, but the way she smiled at him, the way she ran her fingers down his arm, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just some stranger. He wasn't just a friend. Emily leaned into him, whispering something in his ear before they walked inside together. I couldn't breathe. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might break. This was it. The truth I had been dreading. My wife was cheating on me. And she had been lying to my face for God knows how long. I wanted to storm in there, drag her out, demand an explanation. But what good would that do? She'd lie. She'd twist it. I needed more than just seeing them together. I needed undeniable proof. So I stayed in the car, staring at the club's entrance, my heart pounding like a war drum. I wasn't leaving until I had my answer. And when she walked out of that club hours later, her hand intertwined with his, laughing like she didn't have a husband and 2 kids waiting for her at home, I knew there was no going back. Emily wasn't the woman I thought she was. And our marriage? It was already over. I don't know how long I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers started to go numb. The neon lights of the club reflected in my windshield, painting the inside of my car with shifting colors, red, blue, purple, like some twisted kaleidoscope of my unraveling marriage. Emily and her mystery man stood outside, talking. No, not just talking. Flirting. Laughing. She looked up at him with that same playful smile she used to give me years ago, back when we were young and stupidly in love. And then, right in front of me, she kissed him. It wasn't some hesitant, guilty peck. It was deep. Passionate. Like she had been waiting for this moment all night. A sharp pain shot through my chest. It was physical, like something inside me had cracked open. My stomach twisted, and for a second, I thought I might be sick. I wanted to get out of the car. I wanted to walk over there, grab her by the arm, and demand an explanation. I wanted to scream in her face, ask her how she could do this to me, to us, to our family. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, frozen, watching as they climbed into his car and drove off into the night. I don't even remember the drive home. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. The kids were asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing in their father's chest. I walked inside, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking clock on the wall, waiting. And when Emily finally came home, just before dawn, I pretended to be asleep. She slid under the covers without a sound, her body warm from wherever she had been. She didn't touch me. She didn't even look at me. That was the night I realized something terrifying. She didn't love me anymore. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I wanted to, but because I physically couldn't lie there next to her any longer. I got the kids ready for school like I always did, made their breakfast, packed their lunches, helped Lily find her favorite stuffed bunny before we left. I went through the motions, smiling for them, laughing at Ryan's silly jokes, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Emily woke up late, stumbling into the kitchen in her robe, rubbing her temples. She barely acknowledged me as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Late night?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. She nodded. "Yeah. Mom was feeling worse than I thought. I stayed to make sure she was okay." I clenched my jaw. "That's so?" She didn't notice the edge in my voice. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, sipping her coffee like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't spent the night with another man. I wanted to call her out right then and there. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized she had been caught. But I knew better. People like Emily don't admit the truth unless they have no other choice. So I stayed quiet. For now. I spent the next week gathering proof. If I was going to confront her, I needed undeniable evidence. Not just for myself, but for the sake of our kids. I wasn't about to let her spin some sob story and make me the bad guy. So I did what I never thought I'd have to do. I became a man I didn't recognize. I checked her phone every chance I got. I went through her texts, her call logs, her emails. She was careful, deleting messages, making sure there was no obvious trail. But she wasn't careful enough. I found a name. Daniel. She had saved his number under a fake contact. Sarah's work. But the messages? They weren't about work. They were about him. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I hate sneaking around, but I need you. When can I see you again?" Each message was like a knife to my gut. But the worst part? The timestamps. Some of them had been sent while she was sitting right next to me. I closed my eyes, breathing through the rage building inside me. My hands were shaking. I wasn't just angry. I was shattered. But I wasn't done. I installed a tracking app on her phone when she wasn't looking. A small, quiet thing that she'd never notice. And then I waited. 2 nights later, she told me she was going to her parents' house again. I checked the app. She wasn't anywhere near her parents. She was at a hotel. With him. I sat in my car outside the hotel, gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. The glowing red numbers on the dashboard told me it was just past midnight, but I wasn't tired. I was running on pure adrenaline, a mix of rage, betrayal, and disbelief surging through my veins like poison. Emily was in that hotel. With him. I stared at the entrance, watching as people came and went. Businessmen. Tourists. Couples. All of them living their lives, unaware that mine was crumbling right in front of me. I could have walked inside. I could have asked the front desk for her room number, stormed in, caught her in the act. But I didn't. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. I pulled out my phone, opened the tracking app, and took a screenshot of her exact location. I needed this. I needed proof. Then I drove home. I barely slept that night. When Emily finally came home just before sunrise, I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She walked in quietly, trying to be careful, thinking I was still asleep. "Hey," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. She flinched. "Oh, hey," she said, forcing a yawn. "Didn't expect you to be up this early." I just stared at her. She looked like hell, mascara smudged beneath her tired eyes, her hair a mess, wearing the same outfit she had left in. She must have realized how obvious it was because she ran a hand through her hair, laughing awkwardly. "God, I'm exhausted. Mom had me up all night." I almost laughed. "Mom, huh?" I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. She was lying to my face. Again. And I wanted to break something. Instead, I took a sip of my cold coffee, swallowed the bitterness, and forced a smile. "Yeah? She doing okay?" Emily nodded, walking over to the fridge. "Yeah, she's fine now. Just needed me there." Needed her there. I could still see the location tracker on my phone screen. The little red dot, the hotel's address right beneath it. I swallowed back the bow rising in my throat. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her I knew. But not yet. Not until I had enough to destroy every single lie she had told. For the next week, I played along. I pretended like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't watching her every move. I let her think she was getting away with it. And the more I watched, the more I saw just how deep the betrayal went. The whispered phone calls when she thought I wasn't listening. The way she'd disappear into the bathroom for too long, texting someone with a smile on her face. The nights she left, claiming she was going to her parents' house, only to end up anywhere but there. I documented everything. I took screenshots of her texts, tracked her locations, even managed to snap a photo of her in his car when she thought no one was watching. I had enough proof to destroy her. Now I just needed to decide how I was going to do it. The night I confronted her, I made sure the kids were asleep. I didn't want them to see this. Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to the storm about to hit. I walked over, sat across from her, and placed my phone on the coffee table. She barely glanced up. "What's up?" I unlocked my phone, opened the tracking app, and turned the screen toward her. Her expression didn't change at first. Then she saw it. Her location. The hotel's address. The timestamp. Her face drained of color. I watched as she struggled to find the right words, opening her mouth, then closing it again. I leaned forward, my voice calm. Too calm. "You were never at your mom's." Silence. She stared at the phone like it was some kind of bomb, like she could will the evidence away if she just looked hard enough. Then she swallowed, forcing a laugh. What is this? You were tracking me?" I didn't blink. "Yes." Her face twisted in anger. "That's insane, you." I cut her off. "No. What's insane is my wife sneaking off to a hotel with another man and thinking I wouldn't find out." Her mouth snapped shut. For the first time, she looked scared. "Good." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Tell me the truth, Emily. All of it. Right now." She shook her head. It's not what you think." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think." She swallowed hard. "Okay, listen." "No," I snapped. "You listen. I have proof. Your texts. Your calls. Photos. I know everything." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had already destroyed me. Now it was her turn to feel it. Emily sat frozen, her fingers gripping her phone so tightly I thought she might break it. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she didn't have a lie ready. I had her cornered. She started, but nothing came out. I waited. She tried again. "It's not." "Don't." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Don't insult me with another lie." She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. I never meant for this to happen." I scoffed. "That's what you're going with." She looked down at her lap, her hands shaking. "I don't know what to say." I let out a bitter laugh. Try the truth. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she took a deep breath and met my eyes. Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. I cheated. Hearing her say it out loud was like a knife to the chest. Even though I had known. Even though I had proof. Hearing her admit it made it real. I clenched my jaw, my fists curling against my thighs. How long? She hesitated. How long? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. A few months, she admitted. A few months. I exhaled sharply, leaning back against the couch. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted in knots. Months. While I was home taking care of our kids, working to provide for our family. While I was loving her, trusting her. She had been sneaking around with him. The rage inside me burned white hot, but I forced myself to stay calm. Who is he? I asked. She hesitated again. I narrowed my eyes. Who is he, Emily? She swallowed, her eyes darting away. His name is Daniel. I already knew that. But hearing her say his name made it worse. Where did you meet him? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. At a bar. One night when I went out with some friends. I nodded slowly. And what? You just clicked? She didn't answer. I laughed bitterly. Right. Of course. And then what? He made you feel special? Gave you butterflies? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know how it happened, okay? It wasn't supposed to. Stop saying that. I snapped. You chose this. Every single time you lied to my face, every time you snuck out, every time you let him touch you, you chose this. She wiped at her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you. I let out a hollow laugh. Oh, well, that makes it all better. She sniffled. I was unhappy. I stiffened. Unhappy? She nodded, her voice shaking. I love you, but things changed. After the kids, after everything. I felt like I wasn't me anymore. And Daniel, he made me feel alive again. I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my ears. Alive. Like our life together had killed her. Like I had killed her. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So what now? She wiped at her face, sniffling. I don't know. I nodded slowly, exhaling. I did. I stood up. Emily looked up at me, confused. Where are you going? I grabbed my phone and turned to her, my expression unreadable. I need some air. I needed to get the hell away from her before I said something I couldn't take back. I walked out of the house without another word. My legs moved on their own, my mind still reeling from everything Emily had just admitted. The night air was cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. I was unhappy. He made me feel alive again. Her words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were still shaking, my entire body tense with a rage I didn't know what to do with. I could barely think. So I just drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to be anywhere but that house, anywhere but near her. The streets were empty, quiet. My headlights cut through the darkness as I sped down the road, my thoughts spinning out of control. How long had I been blind to this? How many nights had I put our kids to bed, thinking Emily was with her parents, when she was actually with him? Had she ever felt guilty? Even once? Or had she convinced herself that what she was doing was justified? I gritted my teeth, my jaw aching from how hard I was clenching it. I had sacrificed everything for that woman. Worked my ass off so she could have the life she wanted. Took care of our kids, our home, her. And she repaid me by crawling into another man's bed. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. A red light appeared ahead. I slammed the brakes. The tires screeched against the pavement, and I came to a sudden stop in the middle of an empty intersection. My heart was racing, my breaths uneven. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. I couldn't do this. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in this betrayal. I needed to act. I needed to end this now. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, it was past 2 a.m. The house was dark except for the small lamp in the living room. Emily was still awake. She was sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands. When she heard the door open, she looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "You came back," she said softly. I ignored her. I walked past her, heading straight for the bedroom. "Wait," she said, scrambling to her feet. "Please. Talk to me." I turned to her slowly. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" She swallowed hard, nodding. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Fine. Let's talk." She hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she actually wanted to hear what I had to say. I stepped closer, my voice low and controlled. "I need you to understand something, Emily. I would have done anything for you. I loved you. I trusted you. I built a life with you." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "And you threw it away for what? Some guy who made you feel special for a few months?" She sniffled, shaking her head. "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was," I snapped. "Don't stand there and try to rewrite what happened. You cheated. You lied. You broke everything we had." She wiped at her tears. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "But you did. And you didn't just hurt me. You hurt our kids. Our family." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered her laughing with him outside that club. The way she kissed him like I didn't even exist. And the pity disappeared. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "I want a divorce." Emily's sobs stopped instantly. She looked up at me, her face pale. "What?" "You heard me," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done." She shook her head rapidly. "No. No, please, we can fix this." I let out a hollow laugh. "Fix this? How? How do you fix something that's already dead?" She stepped closer, reaching for me. "I still love you." I stepped back. "No. You don't. If you did, you wouldn't have done this." She broke down again, her body shaking. "Please don't do this. Think about the kids." "The kids?" I repeated, my anger flaring again. "You should have thought about the kids before sneaking around with another man." She fell silent. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Emily watched me, her hands clasped together, like she was trying to hold herself together. Finally, she whispered, "Where are you going?" I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. "For now?" "A hotel." She blinked, stunned. "But I'll figure out the rest in the morning." I cut her off. "I'm done talking." She didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, crying as I walked out the door. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about leaving her behind. The hotel room was cold, lifeless, just four walls and a bed. It wasn't home, but neither was the house I had just walked out of. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the duffel bag at my feet. My entire life had just imploded, and all I had to show for it was a bag of clothes and a marriage in ruins. I should have felt relieved. I had made my decision. I had confronted Emily. I had walked away. So why did it still feel like my chest was caving in? I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly, my brain too wired for sleep. There were missed calls from Emily. A few texts. "Please come back. We can talk. I'll do anything, just don't do this. Think about the kids." That last one made my stomach twist. The kids. They didn't know yet. They had no idea their world was about to be ripped apart. Ryan, with his goofy little grin, always so excited to show me his drawings after school. Lily, still so small, still crawling into my lap when she was tired. How was I supposed to tell them? I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening around the phone. I wouldn't let Emily use them against me. I needed a plan. The next morning, I drove straight to a lawyer's office. I didn't know much about divorce, but I knew I needed someone who did. The attorney, a middle-aged man named Harris, listened patiently as I laid everything out: Emily's affair, the lies, the evidence I had gathered. When I was done, he folded his hands on the desk. "You have a strong case," he said. "Especially if you want custody of the kids." That caught me off guard. "Full custody?" I asked. He nodded. "If you can prove she's been neglecting them while carrying on this affair, the courts will take that into account." I swallowed hard. I wanted my kids. I wanted them safe. But taking them away from their mother? No matter how much I hated Emily right now, she was still their mom. I rubbed a hand over my face. "I don't want to hurt them." Harris nodded. "Then we do this carefully. We make sure they're protected, no matter what." I exhaled, nodding slowly. "Okay. What do I need to do?" I stayed away from the house for 2 days. Emily kept calling, texting, begging me to come back. I ignored most of them. Then, on the 3rd day, I got a message that made my blood run cold. "Ryan asked where you were." I didn't know what to say. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. I had to see them. When I walked through the front door, the house felt different. Emily was sitting on the couch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me, she stood up, her eyes hopeful. "You're back?" I shook my head. "I'm here for the kids." Her face crumbled, but I didn't have the patience to deal with her emotions right now. "Where are they?" I asked. She wiped her eyes. "Upstairs. Ryan's been asking about you nonstop." I nodded and headed up. Ryan was sitting on his bed, coloring. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Daddy!" Lily, sitting beside him, squealed in delight and held up her stuffed bunny. "Look!" I knelt down, pulling them both into a hug. God, I had missed them. Ryan pulled back, frowning. "Where have you been?" I glanced at Emily, who was standing in the doorway, watching. I turned back to him, forcing a smile. "I had to take care of some things, buddy." He studied me. "You're coming home now?" I hesitated. Before I could answer, Emily stepped in. "Of course he is," she said quickly. "Right." I looked at her. She was desperate. She thought I would just give in, that I would pretend none of this had happened. I stood up. "No," I said simply. Emily's face paled. Ryan frowned. "Why not?" I crouched down again, looking him in the eyes. "Because Mommy and I need to figure some things out." Ryan's eyes darkened. "Are you fighting?" I swallowed. "A little." He looked between us. "Are you getting a divorce?" Emily sucked in a sharp breath. "Ryan." He looked back at me, waiting for my answer. I could have lied. I could have told him everything was fine. But I refused to be like Emily. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, buddy. We are." Silence. Then, quietly, he asked, "Does that mean you don't love us anymore?" My heart broke. I grabbed his shoulders, shaking my head fiercely. "No. Never. I love you so much. That will never change." Tears welled in his eyes. "Then why can't you stay?" I bit the inside of my cheek. "Because sometimes, even when people love each other, they can't be together." His little face crumpled. Lily, too young to fully understand, just hugged my leg, looking up at me with big, confused eyes. I felt like the worst father in the world. But I had no choice. I kissed the top of their heads. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Ryan didn't answer. Lily just nodded. I stood up, my chest aching, and turned to leave. Emily followed me downstairs, her arms wrapped around herself. When we reached the door, she whispered, "Please don't do this." I turned to her, my voice calm. "You already did." Then I walked out. And this time, I wasn't coming back. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving the house. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me, suffocating. Ryan's face, his tear-filled eyes, the way his little hands had clung to my arm, would haunt me forever. I had broken his heart. No. Emily had broken his heart. I was just the one who had to clean up the mess. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I had done the right thing. Walking away, filing for divorce, it was the only choice. But why did it feel like I was the one losing everything? I had always imagined growing old with Emily. Watching our kids grow up, teaching Ryan how to drive, walking Lily down the aisle someday. That future was gone now. And no matter how much I hated her for what she had done, part of me still grieved for it. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. I had to be strong. For the kids. For myself. Because Emily had already taken enough from me. I wasn't going to let her take my future too. The next few weeks were hell. Emily didn't make it easy. She begged. She cried. She promised she would do anything to fix things. But it was too late. I wasn't going to fall for her lies again. I moved into a small apartment while we worked through the legal process. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A fresh start. The hardest part was sharing custody. Telling the kids had been painful enough. But actually leaving them at the house with Emily, knowing she was the reason our family had fallen apart. It nearly killed me. Ryan barely spoke to me at first. Lily didn't fully understand, but she cried every time I dropped her off at Emily's. The guilt was unbearable. But I kept going. Because what other choice did I have? One night, about a month after I left, Emily showed up at my apartment. She was crying before I even opened the door. I sighed, leaning against the frame. "What do you want, Emily?" She looked up at me, her face red and puffy. "I can't do this," she whispered. I clenched my jaw. "Do what?" She gestured wildly. "This. Being alone, splitting time with the kids, living like this. I made a mistake, okay? But I love you. I love our family." I scoffed. "You should have thought about that before you cheated." She let out a sob, shaking her head. "I was stupid. I was selfish. But I swear, Daniel meant nothing to me." I crossed my arms. "You don't throw away 9 years of marriage over nothing." She wiped at her face. "I don't want a divorce." I took a deep breath, staring at her. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked broken, desperate. But then I remembered all the nights I had sat at home, waiting for her. The lies. The gaslighting. The way she had kissed him like I didn't exist. And just like that, the pity vanished. I exhaled slowly. "Well, I do." Her breath hitched. "Please," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, Emily. We're done." She covered her mouth with her hands, letting out a quiet sob. I didn't say anything else. I just closed the door. And this time, I locked it. The sound of Emily's muffled sobs faded as I leaned against the door, closing my eyes. I expected to feel relief. I had stood my ground. I had made it clear that there was no fixing this. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. I was so damn tired. Tired of the pain. Tired of thinking about the past. Tired of waking up every morning and remembering that my life wasn't what it used to be. But I refused to let that break me. Emily had already stolen too much of my time, my energy, my love. She wasn't going to take any more. The divorce process dragged on for months. Emily fought it at first, clinging to the idea that I would change my mind. She tried everything: apologies, manipulation, even anger. One night, she sent me a long text rant about how I was tearing our family apart, and how I should just get over it. For the sake of the kids. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Get over it? She acted like I had just caught her lying about spending too much money on a shopping spree. Not like she had destroyed our marriage. I didn't even respond. After that, she started cooperating more. Maybe she realized I was never coming back. Maybe she had just grown tired of fighting. Either way, I didn't care. I just wanted it to be over. One day, while dropping off the kids, Ryan asked me something that nearly broke me. "Dad, do you hate Mom?" I froze, looking at him in the rearview mirror. Emily was waiting by the front door, watching us. I turned in my seat, meeting Ryan's gaze. His little face was serious, his hands gripping his backpack. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate her." He frowned. "Then why won't you come home?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Because love isn't enough," I said softly. Ryan didn't understand. And that killed me. But one day he would. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the papers. It was officially over. 9 years of marriage. Gone. I should have been happy. But instead, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. Because no matter how much Emily had hurt me, this wasn't how I had ever imagined my life turning out. But life doesn't care about your plans. It just happens. And you either let it destroy you, or you keep moving forward. I sat there for a long time, staring at the divorce papers, letting the weight of it all settle in. This was supposed to be closure. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like standing in the wreckage of something I had spent years building, looking around, and realizing there was nothing left to salvage. I wasn't just grieving my marriage. I was grieving the man I had been, the man who believed in forever, in trust, in love that didn't break. That man didn't exist anymore. And maybe that was a good thing. Because he had been a fool. For the next few weeks, I kept my head down. I focused on work. On my kids. On rebuilding the life that Emily had shattered. Some days were easier than others. Some days I felt like I was finally moving on, finally putting her behind me. Other days, I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. It took time. More time than I wanted to admit. But slowly, the anger started to fade. The pain became dull instead of sharp. I started laughing again, real, genuine laughter, not the forced kind I had been using to keep my kids from worrying. And one day, out of nowhere, I realized I had gone a full 24 hours without thinking about her. That's when I knew I was finally healing. Emily tried to reach out a few times. Not to get back together, she knew that bridge had burned to the ground, but to talk. She said she wanted us to be friends, for the kids' sake. I told her I'd be civil. But I would never be her friend. Friends don't betray each other. Months passed. Then a year. Life didn't magically become perfect. But it became mine again. I had my kids every weekend, and during the week, I called them every night before bed. Ryan was doing better. Lily was still young enough that she adjusted faster. Emily was still Emily. I heard through mutual friends that she had tried dating again, but nothing serious. I didn't care. Not anymore. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all. When someone betrays you, when they take the love you gave them and throw it away like it was nothing, you don't let them keep a piece of you. You don't let their betrayal define you. You take your broken heart, your shattered trust, and you rebuild. And you become someone they can never hurt again. One night, I was sitting outside my apartment, watching the sunset, when my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. It was a picture of him and Lily, both grinning, holding up a messy drawing with the words, "We love you, Dad." I smiled, my chest warm. Because no matter what Emily had done, no matter how much she had hurt me, she hadn't taken everything. I still had them. And that was all I needed.